The Lonely Songbird by Wayne Mitchum and Destiny Stewart. Cover art by Kelly Cameron. February 3rd, 1996, 11:59 p.m. Saturday. Patricia sat at the kitchen table, tapping her finger on a new box of matches. She was overcome with it all. Her son's problems at school, her husband, and the hardest part of it all, the pile of bills that were spread out in front of her. She unwrapped the plastic film encasing the box and slid it open. Her hand shook as she pulled a match free. Patricia struck the match across the abrasive red strip and watched the flame ignite. She listened to the match pop and crack as the flame burst wildly and then settled back down to a glowing hum. The room was quiet enough to hear the air whistle through the dusty vents of a space heater. It was quiet enough to hear the house creak in its old age. It was even quiet enough for her to notice the gentle tapping on the window from an overgrown bush. And for the first time in a long time, no matter how much she had begged for the fussing and the yelling to stop, she sat in regret that it was now quiet enough to hear herself think too. She cried as she watched the stick burn down. She threw it onto the table and stood up, wiping her tears on her sleeve. A cupboard above the refrigerator had a reserve of liquor that her husband James had tucked away before he got sick. She steadied herself on a chair, pulling the 2 jars from their shelf, and looked for something to pour them into. All of the dishes in the house were dirty. For the past month, she hadn't had to listen to a single complaint about keeping the house in order. James felt it a woman's responsibility to do those things, even after his health kept him from working, forcing Patricia to get a job of her own. She turned the sink knob to hot and waited for the steam. Rinsing a glass clean, she poured it full with rum and vodka. She never enjoyed drinking, and only did it a few times at social events because James wanted her to, and besides, James did enough of that for them both. She pulled the glass to her lips, trying to control the shakes in her hands. Liquor spilled onto her fingers, and the aroma filled her nostrils. She cringed and poured the drink down the drain, dropping the glass loudly on the edge of the sink. She froze and listened for any sound from upstairs. Nothing. No, that won't work. Come on, think, she said, pounding the palm of her hand on her forehead. She paced the hallway leading into the living room and glanced at the pictures on the wall. Family portraits, some new, but most of them older. She studied one in particular. James was wearing a hideous Hawaiian shirt that didn't cover the entirety of his bulging belly. His aviator glasses and bright Bahama shorts screamed tourist. He was smiling big as he stood next to the space shuttle capsule in Huntsville, Alabama. Odin, only 3 at the time, was in his arms. He looked sick and frail. Patricia remembered arguing with James that they shouldn't go, but James said that he wasn't going to cancel the trip just because Odin had a little cold. It turned out to be pneumonia. James always told Odin to suck it up when he wasn't feeling well. A funny thought when Patricia recalled how helpless James had been when he was the one sick. She paused and quickly ran to the bathroom, rummaging through the medicine cabinet. May cause drowsiness. Perfect, she mumbled under her breath. She opened the bottle and chugged it. Her throat burned as the sweet green liquid made its way down. A warmth ran through her chest as she ran her way back to the kitchen table. She sat back down at the table and placed her head in her hands. God forgive me. It was all that she could think to say. Her legs shook wildly, heels pounding a cadence along the oak floor louder and louder until she found the nerve to stand back up. She wiped fresh tears from her eyes, and her face turned cold and empty. As she walked through the house, it took everything in her to fight off the tears again, but a firm bite to the lip fixed that. She had to be strong, for Odin's sake at least. She turned the doorknob slowly to his room and peered inside to see him passed out. She looked at the posters on his wall. his clothes scattered on the floor, and her eyes traced every square foot of the baby blue rug at the foot of his bed that she had bought when he was just a kid. Her heart was heavy, and the thought crossed her mind just to forget about it all and to go to bed and face tomorrow when it came. But her mind was made up. She stuffed the box of matches in her bra and eased her way back downstairs. The soft cries of a puppy grew louder into pleading howls for attention. She opened the laundry room door and picked up the puppy. Her name was Baby. She was the newest addition to the family, a gift from James to Patricia, and she had received the same name that every dog they ever owned had been given. She was a replacement, like all of the ones before her. To Patricia, she had just been another chore, but holding her close to her chest, she couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Her tears poured from her eyes as she kissed Baby on top of the head and sat her in the garage. She closed the door and walked away. "God forgive me," Patricia said again as she pulled the matches from her bra.